Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and this week we have the pleasure of chatting with celebrated longtime educator, author, and motivational speaker Kevin Cripe. A former 27-year veteran of the Modesto County Schools, our guest created an award-winning after-school chess program for students who came from socio-economically challenged backgrounds. Along the way, he has written and spoke frequently on the subjects of childhood moral development and closing the achievement gap. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting kevincripe.motivationalspeaker.com. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It makes me sound good, make me feel good this morning.
I mean, all I have to do is just go by your own biography. You gave me a lot to work with there as I was writing this up. Let's talk about a game that I am terrible at, but it sounds like there are some kids in the Modesto County area who are quite great at chess. What motivated you to want to bring chess into these schools? And, is there something about the game that tends to help build character in students or build education acumen?
My desire to teach chess to students came from a pseudo-selfish place, which was, as a first-year teacher, I would always get asked who my smart ones were. I'd go into staff room and there's a bunch of teachers around. Who do you think your smart ones are? And so I said, well, I think this one is. I think this one. And they go, no, they've been retained, because we had 90% of our student population was free and reduced lunch, and 90% was Hispanic or almost all Mexican. And most of those students who had been retained because they spoke Spanish coming into the school. And so teachers, the natural response from veteran teachers was, that's not a smart kid. And so I remember after my first year, I went, I think there's a bunch of smart ones here. I'm going to do something. And so I started a chess program, and we ended up going to 200 tournaments and and competing in 14 national chess championships. And I had students do really well. And then I was watching students as they became first-generation college graduates, and it was just a wonderful thing to be part of and watch. But I remember just on our first time we were going to go to nationals, we were going to fly from students who had never flown before from San Francisco to North Carolina to nationals. I had a female teacher, a Mexican teacher, came up to me and said, "Don't take these kids to the nationals; they will only embarrass themselves." Oh. And I thought for a second, and I'm innately civil as a human being, so I didn't say any of the things that I thought were uncivil. But I said, no, I'm going to take these students to a whole bunch of tournaments. And so watching them literally change the perception of who they are by doing this game, because when they come back with trophies and they come back with awards and they come back with stories and they come back to school and then share all these things, it kind of redefined how people saw them. And that's why I did it.
So chess was sort of your way to demonstrate to the stakeholders that you have brilliant students here, but what's really happening from an academic standpoint in terms of their grades is just a language barrier. But this other activity they're doing, chess, which can take the language barrier out of the equation because it's a universal language kind of game, shows that you have brilliant students here and that they have these capabilities.
Right. And I remember as later we had a reading program where we would test the students every 3 months, and they would read a passage for a minute and then they'd talk about it for a minute. And you can have 4 possible outcomes. You can have students who read fast and understand everything, and you have students who don't read really well and don't understand much. But then there's a couple other categories in there. There's the students who read slowly but understand. Mm-hmm. And those were almost all English language learners. And they were almost all thought of to need some form of remediation. And when I did that enough, I realized that's the group you want going to chess tournaments, because they're really actually pretty smart. The reason that they're not reading fluently quickly is for a lot of reasons, but maybe they just haven't been around English a lot. That's other group that was in there, which is the group who read super fast but didn't understand anything that they read. They are not overvalued in terms of students. We all value all students, but in terms of the perception of their intelligence, we think of the kids who can speak fluently quickly as more intelligent as those who don't. But it's the exact opposite with those two groups. The ones who really could understand what they were saying, and even if they struggled to read it, those are kids you want in chess club if they could be there.
Makes perfect sense to me. Tell me a little bit about how big your chess program got at its peak, and what sort of hardware were these kids taking home?
I remember one year, near my last year, I had 70 students in my chess program, and I had a room. I was teaching second grade, so I had 24 desks designed for second graders, and I had anywhere from second grade to sixth grade students, and we were going consistently to tournament. What would happen is they would go to their first tournament. A friend of mine would have a tournament up in Fremont, excuse me, and that tournament, the Fremont school was one of the top schools in the state, and had the sons and daughters of Google execs. It was a tough group of kids to go play chess against. And so innately, we would be prepared skill-wise, but not prepared for the first tournament, and they go and lose. And we come back and I say, I think you guys did great. I'm here for you guys. But whenever we lose, I don't value you less. I don't value you less if you lose. I don't value you more if you win. It's just losing happens. It's not fun. We can either quit or get better. And innately, they would all go, we were going to get better. And then the next time they go up, because they knew I supported them no matter what, they would start to do better, and they'd start to win at these smaller tournaments, and we'd go to bigger tournaments. And as they got used to the idea that I was going to care about them regardless of result, then they could wrap their mind around, okay, we're in this new place, this new environment, we're competing against Asian kids. And there weren't that many Asian kids at the school I taught at, or Indian students or whatever. And then they didn't realize that when they were winning and doing it, they were having success at these tournaments, they were actually doing something really that society didn't think was humanly possible. And so that was an enormous amount of fun for me.
I can imagine. That's so cool. And, while your story is incredible and inspiring, it's certainly not that unique. We've seen some examples in inner city schools throughout the country of people like you starting chess programs and having similarly great results. And, I find that very motivating because, it shows that, we have brilliant students everywhere, and that we need to make investments in those students to bring them out in terms of their full potential. And I think there are some lessons in your experience that can be extrapolated to just closing the achievement gap in schools generally. I think what your chess example shows is that to the extent there is an achievement gap, it is not for lack of brilliance or intelligence. There must be other factors at play. So let's talk about closing the achievement gap in schools. What do you think schools are doing well generally, and what should we be doing differently? What are we doing wrong?
I think that public education is an amazing thing, and attempts to educate all children for free. And in other countries, it doesn't work like that. We get compared against other countries, where other countries are really trying to educate what they perceive to be the top students. So I think that goal, that noble goal of trying to educate all students, is a good thing. I think in the US, we have way too much time spent on testing. We should have some testing. I mean, that's accountability is a reasonable thing to want. But as I heard this statistic. It was a guy named Gare Grouse who was talking to people, and he said there was a study, I think in Europe, they asked students, why do you go to school? And 80% of them said, because we have to. Okay. And it told me, and it was something that kind of played into something I'd seen over my career as an educator, which is the focus on public education, because of the focus on testing, is on kids who succeed at testing, which is the top 15 to 20%. If you are in that group of students who are succeeding, then you find education really interesting, because you're one of the best. You're at the top. But if you're in the middle to some kids who are struggling, you don't feel a lot of times when you walk into school like you're part of that. And so I think one of the things I purposed to do in my classroom and with chess was to value three things above all other things. Now, one, success was important. If you sat in my classroom and you were doing great and we've celebrated that. We also celebrated equally the student who improved. Like if you got 1 on a test and the next day you got 2, well, we put your name on. We had a big say, all right, you improved yourself. That is something that's enormous, because I'm not measuring you against this top student. I'm measuring you against yourself, and you chose to improve, and that's awesome. And then also, because you don't know what kids are facing on a daily basis, how they're coming to school, if they just try. And so if I saw a kid or 2 or 3 students who were in what we were trying to endeavor to accomplish, were really trying, we celebrated that. So we celebrated those 3 things equally. And when you celebrate effort, improvement, and success equally, you get buy-in by almost all the students, because they recognize I can be that. I can't be the top some days. Now we're not all at the top, but I can feel comfortable in that classroom because I'm recognized for what I'm capable of doing, and I'm going to try that much harder. So that is, if we could start to focus not just on the successful, because when we do that, we're writing off 80% of the kids. If a kid comes to school and feels like all I am is a test result, and I can't get a good test result this year, then they check out. They might be very nice. They might show up and have good attitude and smile a lot, but mentally they kind of check out. Whereas if they feel like there's something for me in this, and I'm being evaluated by what I'm doing, then they are super engaged. And what we want is engaged learners. And to me, engagement comes from feeling like you're part of the system.
And so how do we keep students engaged? I think that's a big topic these days, particularly with the emergence of so much technology recently. When I talk to most teachers, they say when you put together things like laptops, cell phones, iPads, and now AI coming into the picture, it's become more challenging than ever to keep students engaged. What do we do about this? Particularly amidst so much technology that seems very good at distracting them and keeping them off focus.
I think part of it is the culture of the school, but I still think students crave that human connection. That if you are valuing them and you are putting stuff in front of them that's interesting, they are going to seek that out first. Now, if they're bored, they're gonna go towards other things which they think are more interesting. And plus, the availability of all these things, which is a kind of a parenting and a school administration question, is what is going to be allowed at the school? We're going to talk to parents. Here's what our standards are. I mean, a lot of those things can be dealt with in terms of the 6 hours or 8 hours of the school day by just effective communication. Say, here's what we're going to have at the school. Here's what we're not going to have. And if you want your students to improve, here's what you should be doing at home, and have talks about just the danger of just, doom scrolling, just having your kids sit, for hours and then staring at a cell phone. I mean, it's just, it's worse than drugs in a lot of way for kids. And I think sometimes we're not conveying how bad that is to parents and what some alternatives might be. But in a school, you can set the ground rules. You can say, at an elementary school, at a junior high or high school, here's what is true at our school. Here's why we're doing it. And if you want help, we can help, here's some ideas for what you can do at your house. I mean, all of those things, we can't magically wave a wand and get rid of technology. And it has some useful application, but a lot of it is just so dangerous and so bad for children. I don't think we've been able to convey that message. And you see it in other countries where they simply ban it. Children are not allowed to do certain things.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. In terms of setting the ground rules that you mentioned, what is your feeling? What is your position on schools just banning technology? No phones in the building, no laptops in the class. I've even had some teachers say that they've gone all the way back in terms of turning back the clock, and all of the assessments now are just done pencil and paper because it keeps students more engaged. It reduces the impact of AI. What's your feeling on that?
When I retired, which was now almost 10 years ago, we were coming into this influx of all this technology, cell phones. At the school I was at, no students really had cell phones. I was at elementary school. We didn't have that problem or issue. We'd go to computer lab and deal with computers. The excuse me, the explosion of this, I would think what is needed, and then you also had COVID come in where everybody had to be on a computer and everybody had to do stuff. So it kind of distorted what needed to happen. But I do think there is no compelling need to have a child with a cell phone at a school during the day. There is a need after school for a child to be able to communicate with their family. Are they getting picked up, where they're going? But I don't see how a cell phone has a purpose in a classroom or at a school during the school day. It doesn't. The other things like computers and technology, if you have a student that's out there with the laptop that's out while you're trying to teach, again, I don't know the purpose of that thing. There are ways which you could constructively have students with laptops if you were doing a lesson and they were all going to the same spot. But I think some of it's just ground rules that, at this school, we want to teach students. We have these methods to engage students. And for what we're doing at the school, we don't need that technology being activated in a classroom. And I think the more you take control over it and just say for 6 hours a day, we don't need this. We may need something if we're doing a specific lesson, having to go to a specific place where we can all get there, that's fine. But just the sort of having kids be able to pull out stuff and take a look at technology, schools should be saying no to that. I mean, just as an interruption, it doesn't help. It doesn't help classroom management. There's a whole bunch of things. I just think that part of technology, schools need to get away from, or as to whatever. And I'm sure it's different in different states and different school districts.
You've written and spoken frequently on the topics of building character in young people. And as a fairly new parent, now I have a 4-year-old child, this is something I'm thinking a lot about. So let me just ask you this advice as a dad. What is the most important thing I should be doing right now and over the next few years with my child to raise a good character, decent human being?
I think consistency is and I'm going to go back to a quadrant idea, which is what you say in public, what you do in private, and kids watch that. And so if you do terrible things in public and do terrible things in private, well, then you're a bad person, and hopefully kids will innately go, I think there's something better than this. And so as they get older, they may gravitate towards something good. If you're a good parent and you do good things in public and private, you're maximizing their chance to become successful and moral and decent people because you're showing consistency. The kids who get the most messed up are the ones who have parents who are publicly talking about virtues and values and all this thing, but in private being horrible people. And those kids are the ones that need therapy. Those are the kids who go, I don't know what a moral base is because I'm being told this, there's these rules, there's these things posted in a classroom, and yet my parents don't do any of them. And so it's that inconsistency is brutal on kids because they're watching you. Your 4-year-old is assessing you right now. They watch you get mad. What makes my dad mad? And when he's mad, what does he do? My dad got mad a few times, and I've been mad a few times. I've been driving my car, taking my kids somewhere when they were younger, and a guy cut me off, and I said a bunch of bad words and used the wrong finger. And I sat there and I go, what would my dad do? As I'm driving along, I go, my dad would apologize. And about 10 minutes later, I looked at my kids and I said, those words that came out of my mouth were not appropriate. Shouldn't have said those. I'm sorry. And a large part of parenting is if you say and espouse things and you try to be this person in public, be that person in private, because kids are watching that and they're listening to everything. And if you are not consistent, if you are just this big hypocrite, that messes them up in terms of the ability to make moral decisions later in life.
Couldn't agree more. Kids, especially at a young age, seem to have very sophisticated hypocrisy detectors, and I have to be very vigilant about that, and making sure that. And I agree with you. The most important thing that you can do to build children of good character is to lead by example. Our guest has been author, educator, and motivational speaker Kevin Cripe. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting kevincripe.motivationalspeaker.com. Kevin, we got one more question for you. And given everything that you've talked about in education, I'm particularly excited to hear your answer to our final question. If with the snap of your fingers, you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
I would want to know how children perceive their value going through the system. And let me just give you a quick story about that. Took one of my best players up to a chess tournament in Berkeley. We're coming back, and it's a 3-day tournament, it's a long tournament, and I'm about 75 yards ahead of the group, and she's won first place. She's got $800. She's beaten all adult men to get this thing. It's an amazing accomplishment. This guy comes running out of the tournament hall. He's yelling, Julie, wait. And I was like, oh man, what's this going to be? So I turn around, I trudge back towards the group. This guy runs up, has an interaction, and runs off. And I get to Julie, I go, hey, what happened there? And, because it's a crazy adult man running after a 14-year-old girl. And so she just looks, she gets a big smile on her face. She says, he asked me for my autograph. Oh. And she became a first-generation college graduate. There was in her experience in school and through an extended activity, chess activity, she found that she was capable and a learner. She wasn't hearing that in the neighborhood. She wasn't hearing, I'm a smart person. She wasn't hearing, I can go places. But for each child to understand that they are unique and can contribute something and can accomplish something, if I could magically wave a wand, I would create schools where kids feel that continually 6 hours a day. And that doesn't mean that they're all going to be good or all going to be well behaved. That means you're maximizing the opportunity for a kid to go, I can do something special. And if that happens at a school, that is on a routine basis where it's a pattern, where it's something that staff and administration are continually doing, you are going to turn schools around. You're going to turn the lives of students around and allowing them to feel like I can take on this world and I can get it right. And if I don't get it right, if I get it wrong, there's going to be people who care about me. That will change education forever.
Well, and speaking of leading by example, that's certainly something you've done in your own work. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show this week. This was a treat.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for checking out Big Ideas in Education.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.